All right, welcome back to Exponential Awareness. I may have already covered this in yesterday's video, but in case I didn't, here it is again. SpaceX, led by Elon Musk, withdraws employees from Brazil and discourages travel to the country following increased abuse of authority by Supreme Court, STF, ministers, and Brazilian government. In an email sent last week, SpaceX President Gwen Shotwell advised employees not to travel to Brazil for work or leisure, according to people familiar with the message. Additionally, the space technology company relocated its small group of non-Brazilian employees who were in the country, according to one of those people. Foreign investors who had invested in Brazil pulled back after the decision to block the social network X and freeze Starlink's accounts in the country. Over the weekend, Arthur Lira, the president of the Chamber of Deputies, warned that the measure could increase legal uncertainties in the country and deter other businesses. Starlink has grown rapidly in Brazil in recent years, according to the company. There are about 250,000 customers across the country. The business has gained ground in Brazil's agricultural heartland and the Amazon regions, where traditional internet services may be non-existent or reliable. Again, reading from the Western News Update tab. In Brazil, 24 out of 81 senators have publicly stated that they are supporting the impeachment of Supreme Court Justice Alexander de Moraes, known for ordering the blocking of the social network X in the country, and the arrest of political opponents, and the censorship of headlines and interviews. Very strange that a judge has that much authority and power in the first place in any country. I do believe I read through some of this stuff yesterday, and I believe I had some of this stuff late last night after the last video. Let's see. This is hitting the shock or the news waves and creating shock waves today. An indictment: Russian propagandists used Tennessee content company to push disinformation. The headline reads: The U.S. Justice Department has indicted Tim Pool's parent company for allegedly accepting $10 million in covert funding from Russia to produce pro-Russian propaganda content. Some opinion posts after this from that channel. It says they are coming for the last remnants of free speech and dissident in the West under the ruse and pretense of foreign propaganda. I think many people would agree with that analysis. And there's another article from this channel that says Rethinking the Dollar, and it's pointing to that same event, saying, I bet a lot of people believe this. A lot of people believe that they are Russian propagandists. I don't know what to make of it, heads or tails, but I will tell you the timing is impeccable. Why now? The U.S. Department of Defense will launch military repair hubs in the Indo-Pacific countries of Japan, South Korea, Australia, Singapore, and the Philippines, sources told Nikkei Asia. And it envisions a global network of repair hubs for key warfighting platforms. I believe you can add to that list Guam. I believe they're building capabilities out there to repair various military equipment. As a reply to the earlier Brazilian government incidents, here's a few notes here that this person provides. Over the past 48 hours, Brazilian government websites and servers faced a large-scale cyber attack that target law enforcement agencies following the Brazilian ban on Twitter and X. According to available data, the Federal Supreme Court, STF, the National Telecommunications Agency, Anatel, and the Federal Police, PF, suffered cyber attacks after the court ordered the block of X in Brazil, according to Folha de S. Paulo. Brazilian Supreme Court Justice Alexander de Moraes' family law firm was also targeted. The attack began late Monday, September 2nd, 2024, and continues until present time. Per information available to Bellum Acta, such an act is being carried out by actors from Venezuela, Chile, Argentina, Guatemala, as reprisal for the nationwide censorship of the social media in the country. The action was claimed by Brazil's Azael group, an anti-communist hacktivist group with support from the aforementioned groups, including groups that recently took part on the attacks against Iranian financial institutions. This next data point comes from Germany. Apparently, TikToks of women, specifically younger ones that would have, I guess, the norms of being attractive, some would say, are filming themselves dancing to a remix of Gigi de Agostino's 1999 song Blah Blah Blah, with the lyrics changed to AfD Deutschland Party, AfD, which is has been labeled as a far-right group by some people in the government. And so if you want to go check out that video, you can go look it up. I'm not going to play it here, but it is circulating on social media. In Ukraine, from last night, this post came out. Over the last 2 hours, Ukrainian, Belarusian, and Russian channels reported explosions over Gomel, southern Belarus. Very interesting. Ukrainian channels claim that the Ukrainian Air Force downed Shahed UAVs over the Belarusian city. Russian and Belarusian channels claim that the Ukrainian army attacked Gomel, and thus the air defense system of Belarus for engaging on targets over the city. If you look at value propositions and the value of this and the move of this and the consequences that would come of this, it's hard to see Ukraine attacking Belarus. That would be a very strange move. The Kursk offensive, albeit I think a strategic blunder, I could see how one would think that would be a good move. However, opening up a new front with a second military and a second nation would not be a smart move for Ukraine at this time. So when looking at value propositions of doing something like that, I don't see why Ukraine would do anything of that sort. I could see how a unmanned aerial vehicle could lose connection with a transmitter and go into some sort of automatic flight path and might circle over Belarus. I could see that, but an intended incursion into a new nation with the issues that Ukraine's already facing with manpower and supplies issues, I don't see that being the move right there. Just a quick opinion on that. Aurora Police Department confirms suspects arrested for shooting in July on Nome Street have documented or suspected Venezuelan TDA associations or gang ties. So we're 2 months later, and the government's finally confirming that which the public knew right away. Here's an interesting data point. It shows Tim Walls' family. Let me scroll back down. It shows Tim Walls' family, supposedly, in Nebraska, pose for a photo wearing custom Trump shirts. Photo appears to be verified as legit. So that's an interesting data point. If true, that Walls' own family supports the opposition front. Wouldn't that do something significant to their ability to win? I don't know. Breaking. Attorney General Merrick Garland details the Justice Department's elections threats task force. The task force is marshaling the full resources of the Justice Department to aggressively investigate and prosecute threats targeting election workers, officials, and volunteers. The regime is ramping up its fear campaign ahead of November, is the added opinion piece there. It sounds very reminiscent, deja vu of things that have happened in the past. Another piece here. Let's see where this has come from. It's not saying exactly, but the post says, "This is anarcho-tyranny. We are indicting President Trump for believing the wrong lawyers, but if you break into America and take over our buildings, flaunting guns, we call it diversity, and grant you sanctuary." Yes, very interesting point indeed. Question is why? Why would the police departments and governments not do anything about that? What would be the motive? What would be the value proposition of bringing these people in and allow them to do that without any consequences? If you show me the incentive, I will show you the outcome. What is the incentive? What is the value proposition? Next post here. San Rafael police have shared this surveillance video from a home consignment center in the hopes that public that the public can help identify suspects seen smashing display cases and allegedly stealing jewelry in September 3rd incident. We are seeing more and more of this stuff occur. So here you see a video of them smashing into cases, attempting to smash into cases, successfully smashing into cases. Perhaps not successful. It looks like they didn't get in there. Oh, no, they did. No. Can't tell. Looks like they're having a bit of difficulty getting in to the display cases. There we go. Looks like he got in the back there after hopping over the case. And is now pulling stuff out. It's a very interesting design flaw in those cases. The glass is not smashable, but if you hop over the case, you can easily smash in the wood panels in the back. Might want to rethink your barriers to entry there. Might also want to arrest criminals and prosecute them for crimes. Breaking. NDIS Minister Bill Shorten officially announces a new government digital ID scheme called Trust Exchange. I believe this is in Australia. It is a collaborative effort with Finance Minister Katie Gallagher, which promises to give Australians the ability to verify their identity and credentials based on official information already being held by the government. So it's an ability. It's not a control thing. We're giving you the ability to do something. As part of the Digital ID project, it has been allocated $11.4 million in budget for its rollout, and have partnered with Google and Telstra for the development of its technology. Bill Shorten ended his speech in the National Press Club by quoting, "Imagine if we practiced radical trust in the people." It's an ability, and it's about trust. Never again, they said. Germany should be broken up again. Just can't be trusted. How many times does a dog have to bite before we learn? This is a tweet from someone named Luke Ming Flanagan. Irish MEP Luke Ming Flanagan echoes Theodore Kaufman in his calls to break up Germany because the Germans can't be trusted. The audacity to think that you, as another country, have the right to go break up other countries. That's all you need to know about the morals of the West. Per the DOJ and other sources, Tenet Media, bankrollers of prominent conservative commentators such as Lauren Southern, Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, and Benny Johnson are alleged to have received millions from Russian state media to spread pro-Russian propaganda in the United States. The indictment, unsealed in the federal court for the Southern District of New York, doesn't identify the Tennessee company, but descriptions in the indictment match those of Tennessee-based Tenet Media. The indictment states the company describes itself on its websites as a network of heterodox commentators that focus on Western political and cultural issues. Tennessee-based company Tenet Media has the same message on its homepage. The indictment states the Tennessee-based company was incorporated around January 19th, 2022, which matches records from the Tennessee Secretary of State's office. And notes here on this post, this is a major development, even if the allegations made by the DOJ are true. After 9 years of dubious accusations against conservative and Republican medias of promoting Russian views on the American public, the Democrat-led DOJ is now getting ready to censor all opposition media, regardless of how mild their criticism is of the current federal government. This sounds very reminiscent of the communist book burnings that happened. Oftentimes people point to a certain World War II group that did book burnings. I think they only burned about 4,000 books, and the communist group burned about 30,000 books. But nonetheless, destroying the ability to have opposition or external thoughts, thought control police, the ministry of right think or thought, if you will destroy the ability to say anything in opposition. And the interesting thing is about this, let's say it's going to cause an evolution of things to come, unintended consequences, if you will. Let's say you hold up the middle finger to an official and they decide to ban that gesture. Well, people will just come up with a new gesture that replaces it. And eventually, they'll ban that gesture. And a new gesture will form. And so on and so forth until everything is banned. And once everything is banned, then governments have real problems on their hands, because once the people experience that, all sides and factions will say enough is enough. And that's the only path this leads down. And it's the same pattern and the same path that history demonstrates to us. French President Macron relaunches plan to replace Notre Dame's stained glass windows with quote-unquote modern updates. So a whitewashing of history and modernizing it, which is to, if you think as buildings as examples of culture, it's modernizing things and saying this is the new culture, and the old culture is being deleted. The Pentagon will launch, let's see, where do we went over that? Dead internet is real. This post points towards Twitch streamer Destiny, which I believe is an open relationship and perhaps not an individual I'd be pointing to as any sort of efficacy for an example, but nonetheless, it says Twitch streamer Destiny recently found out just how much of the internet is populated by bots and AI-generated people. But what's really driving the growth of fake online activity? Why would organizations adjacent to the security state push down the internet signal-to-noise ratio? Because the internet is a big problem for the security state. And that's what we talked about a couple posts back with this targeting of people who speak to opposition points. The next post here, let's see, I don't know, I think it is a U.S. location. Based in the U.S., concern over housing costs hits record high across rich nations. Dissatisfaction with housing costs has hit a record high across rich countries, soaring above other worries such as healthcare and education. Half of respondents in OECD nations are dissatisfied with the availability and affordability of housing, according to Gallup Analytics figures. A sharp rise in since central banks hiked interest rates to deal with the worst bout of inflation in a generation. And to that point, that is actually a fallacy. Interest rates rise first, and then the Federal Reserves, the central banks, increase their interest rates above the market in order to pull liquidity out of the market, in the thought that that liquidity will no longer be funding private businesses, and therefore private businesses will go out of business and lay people off, which will decrease demand for goods and services and thus cause prices to drop. That is how the system really works, and that is their thought process. While higher rates have helped bring down property prices, as I was pointing to, in several European countries, housing remains more expensive than before the pandemic, even before factoring in higher borrowing costs. What's interesting about this is I have looked in areas local to me, and I'm seeing housing prices plummet right now. And I'm talking about some properties dropping $60,000 in a 2-week period, and many other properties dropping $5,000 to $15,000 in a period. I'm also seeing more properties being listed in the price point that I've been observing for several years now. I'm seeing more properties being listed and prices dropping than ever before. Or I should say than in the past 5 years that I've been watching it. Here's a video from George Soros. It says, George Soros is quoted as saying, "I was very much involved in the collapse of the Soviet system. That was my debut as what I call myself, a political philanthropist," openly admitting to what we all know he does. Kamala says she believes in freedom, but I was put on a secret terror watch list after I publicly criticized her. No one will be safe from political retaliation under a Harris administration. I put my life on the line for this country. Now the government calls me a terror threat. That is from Tulsi Gabbard, I believe. And on the Tim Pool and Tenet Media topic, another post. I have a sincere question about the Tim Pool Tenet Media DOJ situation. If you were offered $100,000 per episode to produce podcasts for shows, but were never required to plug something or promote a brand on a website URL in exchange for that money, and you were just paid $100,000 to produce whatever show you wanted with no strings attached, wouldn't that raise huge red flags in your mind? Wouldn't you want to know why, value proposition, what I keep bringing up, why somebody wants to pay you $100,000? For me, such an offer would cause my spidey senses to explode. This image is from the DOJ indictment document. So that's a very interesting point. If you were given $100,000 in exchange for not having to do anything other than what you would already be doing, wouldn't you want to know why? What's the value proposition for you to give me this $100,000? And here's a funny meme. It shows Tucker Carlson asking Putin a question. The question is, what's your secret weapon? And Putin's sitting there casually responding, pop culture podcasts. A quip on the previous post. Let's see, where do we have this from? I can't remember. I think this is France. I'm not sure. The quote says, we need to move away from the term nuclear deterrence towards nuclear intimidation. This is a quote. The West thinks we don't have working nuclear weapons. Oh, this must be in Russia. They convince themselves that we don't have all of this, that it's all fairy tales. That is why we will have to strike not only at Ukraine, but also at the gabbling Nazi scum who are now pretending to be states. That appears to likely be from Russia. Very strong statements there. Alabama is farming out incarcerated people to work at hundreds of companies, including McDonald's and Wendy's. The state takes 40% wages and often denies parole to keep people as cheap labor. Getting written up can lead to solitary confinement. This is modern day slavery, the Post reads. That's a pretty long video. I'm going to finish watching that later. Very shocking revelations. That's literally modern day slavery. But it's also an opportunity to re-enter the workforce and prove yourself and get out if you have good behavior, I suppose. Here's a meme here. It shows FBI folks wearing blue shirts with yellow writing on the back and khaki pants. And then it shows, I think that they're referred to as the Patriot Front in blue shirts and khaki pants and carrying around flags. And it says, when the government gives you 2 jobs, but there's only room for 1 uniform in the budget. Very interesting. Very interesting comparison there indeed. Belarusian Ministry of Defense confirms that Belarusian armed forces air defense systems engaged and destroyed a salvo of Ukrainian UAVs over Gomel. So now it's a salvo of Ukrainian UAVs over Gomel. Statement by the Chief of General Staff, First Deputy Commander of the Air Force and Air Defense Forces, Colonel Sergei Frolov, regarding the violation of the state border of the Republic of Belarus in the airspace. Tonight, September 5th, a violation of the state border of the Republic of Belarus in the airspace, presumably by unmanned aerial vehicles, was recorded. A decision was made to destroy them due to the timely actions of the air defense forces on duty. All targets of the intruders were destroyed. The matter is being investigated. From France, France's left wing says regime in crisis, calling for protests on September 7th, 2 days from now. Seeing talks among French leftist commentators to break up the decades-old Republican front against the RN, since the center and center-right will work with RN anyway. Which is very interesting. You saw the West calling for the breakup of Germany, and now you're seeing France's left wing calling for the breakup of protests and the breakup of Republican parties. So with that data point, you can say, the whole West is in lockstep, marching to the same, their same hopeful outcome. A French MP from Paris says that France is now a dictatorship and that a revolution is thus made necessary. So I'm guessing this is from the target of the previous post in a reply saying that this is a dictatorship. Reports of a gunman carrying out an attack in Germany, and police officers responded. This was reported to be near the Israeli consulate in Munich. The perpetrator, who was later deleted, seemingly used a historic Mauser rifle. It's funny. I didn't read that detail just now, but that's exactly what I thought it was. Fitted with a bayonet. And there's plenty of footage online of that if you want to go watch it. Israeli media reported that the shooter has been neutralized by German police. It is worth mentioning that 52 years ago today, which is yesterday, Palestinian militants took Israeli athletes hostage at the Munich Olympics in 1972. Actually, I think that was today. It was 8:18 in the morning, so yeah, that would have been daytime, their time. Sometimes I get the impression that those who govern Ukraine are aliens, said Vladimir Putin, president of Russia. Continuing there, Russia is not pursuing a de-dollarization policy. It was not Russia that refused to settle in dollars. We were refused to settle in dollars, says Vladimir Putin, president of Russia. Again, continuing with quotes from Putin, mobilization in Ukraine will completely bleed the country dry, which is why I find it very interesting that they would even think to attack Belarus. You see, those two statements don't coalesce. Biden was our favorite. However, they removed him from the race, but he recommended all his supporters to support Harris, which means we support him too, which I think is probably a misleading statement. And I think they definitely don't support that. But I would think what they support is Biden and Harris because they see what it's doing to the U.S. and what it's doing to the West. He continues and says, Harris' laugh is so infectious. It means that everything is fine with her, Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, says. And that's why I think he's actually being sarcastic here, because it's very well known that in Russian society, the reason you don't see a lot of people just randomly smiling, they think you're crazy if you just go on about smiling for no reason. They literally think you must have a mental condition. And so for him to sit there and say Harris's laugh is so infectious, when she clearly laughs about nonsensical items and topics, I think knowing Slavic culture, and specifically Russian culture, that him saying that is pointing out that he thinks it's good for Russia, and that's why they support that party. And I don't mean good in the terms of a working relationship. I mean the good in the terms of destroying the opponent, destroying itself. Mass arrests as summer of heat pro-Palestine and climate activists block entrances to Citibank headquarters in New York City. Protesters chained themselves to a sign reading genocide and were forcefully removed from front doors as huge crowd of headquarter workers wrapped around the building. This is from Atlanta. The post, which appears to be from X, reads, FBI Atlanta responded earlier today to Appalachia High School following reports of an active shooter. Throughout the day, FBI personnel have been coordinating with and supporting local and state law enforcement. The FBI will dedicate all available resources as requested to seek justice and bring closure for the victims and their families. And it goes on to describe the incident as it unfolded. They're reporting a 13-year-old male, where other sources have reported a 14-year-old male. So interesting conflict there. This is another video that says Putin is to support Vice President Kamala Harris for her presidential run. Which I think, looking at his facial expressions in this video, I think he's holding back his laughter that he probably thinks with that he won't have to fight America because America will destroy itself. And he makes comments about her expressive and infectious laugh again while smirking quite a bit. And you can see the host and the people in the crowd are also laughing, which I think points to this is a sarcastic remark and not a true, authentic remark being made. Swiss government commission issues report recommending revamp of neutrality policy, reapproachment with NATO and EU. In recent released reports, a group of experts recommend to the government that the country, which has been neutral since 1515, work on a common defense capability with the EU and NATO. Since the Russian, this is a quote from the Swiss government, since the Russian attack on Ukraine, neutrality has once again become the subject of political debate, both at home and abroad. Pressure on Switzerland to clarify its position is growing, reads the report, calling for a revision of its neutrality policy. The experts preparing the report, including diplomats, senior officials, and former head of Swiss Army, and Wolfgang Eisinger, the former director of the Munich Security Conference, delivered their findings to a Swiss Defense and Security Minister, Viola Amherd, who is also president of the Confederation for 2024. The experts stopped short of suggesting that Switzerland entirely scrap its neutrality and join NATO, but they do urge deeper ties to the military alliance and the EU on joint training, defense against ballistic missiles, and bilateral and multilateral exercises. The gunman shot dead by police in central Munich has been identified as an 18-year-old Austrian national believed to be resident in Austria. A spokesman for the police in southern German city told reporters. And this is a piece on CNN. Apparently, Brian Stetler has been called for a return. He also called the Hunter Biden laptop scandal a fabricated story, allegedly orchestrated by Donald Trump and Russian intelligence. And therein lies the issue that most people have with Tenet Media and Tim Pool and others being called Russian propagandists or paid Russian propagandists, because here we have seen many times that people have pointed towards Russian collusion and Russian interference, and it has been disproven many times over. So he is coming back to CNN. It sounds like just in time for the elections, which demonstrates a pivot back towards the same stuff he was doing before. Quote from Trump, Barron, quote unquote, knows so much about the Gen Z vote and is helping me with it. As president, this is Conor McGregor. Apparently Conor McGregor is reportedly going to run as president for Ireland. And here is a tweet from him. As president, I hold the power to summon the Dáil as well as dissolve it. So as I said before, I would have all the answers the people of Ireland seek from these thieves of the working man, these disruptors of the family unit, these destructors of small businesses, and on and on and on. These charlatans in their positions of power would be summoned to answer to the people of Ireland, and I would have it done by day end. Or I would be left with no choice but to dissolve the Dáil entirely. Stop the train until the people of Ireland deserve the answers they seek, point blank. This would be my power as president. I know very well Ireland needs an active president employed wholly by the people of Ireland. It is me. I am the only logical choice. 2025 is upcoming. Apparently that is his bid and entry into a presidential running. With regards to U.S. and China relations, eyeing China, U.S. plans to deploy satellites to track targets by 2030s. A senior U.S. Space Force official said the Pentagon has set its sights on the early 2030s to deploy satellites bearing advanced sensors for tracking airborne and ground targets so that America can keep pace with security threats posed by China and Russia. General Michael Getlin shared his estimate when asked about the Space Force's timeline for deploying new intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities in space. The service has been working with intelligence community to develop satellites that can perform the Ground Moving Target Indication GMTI mission from space. And I think recently, in the last year, we've seen videos of various laser scanning events happening over various countries and geographical regions with people recording the events. And this is probably that technology being practiced, being developed, researched, and developed. This is a news piece here from CBS Los Angeles. New, a suspect who deleted an innocent driver in pursuit crash flees from police custody at hospital. California Highway Patrol officers say that the suspect who deleted an innocent driver when fleeing from police in Fontana has escaped their custody while he was being monitored at a hospital. Apparently not monitored well enough. From Donald Trump, it says U.S. sanctions weaken the dollar's role in the world. And I think it weakens the dollar externally outside the U.S., but it strengthens the dollar in the U.S. In order to be the world reserve currency, you have to run a trade deficit with the rest of the world in order to export your dollars, meaning you have to suppress your manufacturing and production capabilities within your country so that it creates demand for goods and services externally from other countries. By creating that demand, you then are able to export your dollars to those countries, further making it a global reserve currency. So, if we were to look at the slogan of his campaign, Make America Great Again, if you truly wanted to make America great again, then you would seek to no longer be the world's reserve currency and thus no longer have the desire to run a trade deficit with most of the other countries in the world in an effort to export your dollars around the world. And therefore, your dollars would stay locally, be invested locally, and you would produce and create the manufacturing and production facilities locally, which would create more jobs, which would stabilize the economy, which would pull the U.S. out of a death spiral and put it back on a path towards being great again. So I think it's very interesting, this statement from the person who claims to want to make America great again. That is the facts of the plumbing and how it works in the world with the reserve currency in the US dollar. So that quote has to be balanced against those factual plumbing and systems and how things work in economics. And that is what concerns me the most is I think many of the people running the country and in positions of power have absolutely no idea how macroeconomics actually works. Who is Michael Barnier, who is now at helm in Paris? At 73 years old, he's the oldest prime minister in history of the Fifth Republic. He was minister and European commissioner multiple times. When Brexit happened, his experience earned him the job of negotiating Brexit on EU's behalf, a position that he fulfilled truthfully until the peaceful succession of Britain from the EU was completed under a comprehensive Brexit deal. A Catholic Gaullist, he is against immigration, favors austerity, both on financial and climate issues, and tends to cooperate with Marie Le Pen to get things done. His name was suggested by Marie Le Pen to Emmanuel Macron. A quote from Keith Woods in the UK, the Tories were so bad on immigration that even Tony Blair thinks it went too far. We've swapped out single people coming from Europe for families from Asia and Africa. How has this helped us, is the quote. Trump says he will create a government efficiency commission, possibly headed by Elon Musk, for drastic reforms of the entire U.S. federal government. What follows that is a meme based on that quote, which shows some people looking very suspiciously. You have Fry from Futurama, Flanders from The Simpsons, that squinting dog, the squinting character from SpongeBob, and a squinting captain, whatever his name is, from Futurama as well. Very, very interesting indeed. A government efficiency commission, possibly headed by Elon Musk. Very suspicious indeed. Here's another meme that points to the Tenet Media and Tim Pool stuff. And it's showing, what is that guy's name from Inglourious Bastards? Colonel something. Anyways, it shows him smoking his pipe, looking suspiciously. I think it's from one of the opening scenes in the movies. And it says, you're sheltering podcasters under your floorboards, aren't you? In reference to Tenet Media and Tim Pool's alleged behavior from the DOJ. From Robert Barnes, anyone who buys Russiagate 2.0 Tenet Media is a sad, pitfall sucker. Real likely story, not a Russian government op at all, but closer to a Langley source disinfo op to drop during the election to aid Democrats, fuel Russian paranoia, and intimidate independent content creators. Interesting opinion there. With regards to UK and Israel relations, a Kaisamak aid company, a Jewish charity in the UK, is accused of using donations to supply Israeli soldiers with equipment. The UK Charity Commission is investigating the case. And that wraps up everything for this episode. I will have more updates from Western events as well as other events in the coming days and hours, and I will be posting those. Until next time, stay exponentially aware.